Hey, Joy Olson here of Blockbuster Fundraising. You know, I'm always looking for little tips and blogs for you, and I found one and I thought that you get a kick out of it. And it was written by Rachel Beer, The 7 Deadly Sins of Fundraising Appeals and How to Avoid Them. So, can you hardly wait? You don't want to make any of these 7 deadly sins. Well, Rachel says that over the years and the appeals that she's learned a lot about the factors that determine success in fundraising, and even more about what to avoid doing. She says, I'm a learning detective because that's one of the privileges of working with so many different charities across a wide variety of campaigns. So these points and tips are mainly written in the context of individual donors, okay? But she says they're relevant anywhere in direct marketing techniques, so let's take a look because they represent some of the most common issues in fundraising appeals that Rachel has come across, and she also is going to include suggestions to help you avoid these same pitfalls. And she hopes that some of these insights and suggestions are useful and you're going to want to test or prove or disprove them for yourself. Okay, number 1, beating around the bush. She says that many people seem to feel slightly embarrassed about asking for donations. She says, I only say this because there have been numerous occasions where I've been asked to remove most of the asks for a donation from the appeal copy. Once to the point that the first mention was almost at the bottom of the last page of the letter, as though it was an afterthought, as though it wasn't needed, I guess, huh? Well, hey, this is a fundraising appeal, not a magazine article or a short story, so get to the point and do it quickly. You've heard of the saying, if you don't ask, you don't get. Never has this been more true than in this context of writing your annual appeal. You really need to include the ask, be more direct about it, and get it out there right away. And the more you do this, the better the response will be. She says, here are her tips to get a better response and more money. Number 1, include the ask early. The earlier the better. Repeat the ask several times throughout the copy, at least 3 times. 2, be direct. Phrases like, will you donate today, will be much more effective than your support would be appreciated. 2, confusing the issue. It's tempting to try and make your appeal achieve more than one objective. More bang for your buck, right? Wrong. If you want donors to make a one-off donation, asking for a one-off donation. If you want donors to sign up for a monthly donation, ask them to sign up for a monthly donation. If you want to open a dialogue about legacy giving, create a communication that focuses on that and nothing more. In other words, don't try to be all things, ask for all things in one appeal, because if you do, you diminish the response to all of them. Also, she says, resist trying to educate your audience about everything your charity does. Attempting to cover too much ground in the space and attention span that you have available is just going to make your appeal vague and seem directionless. It won't go into enough depth in any one area to engage the audience sufficiently to donate or respond. Tips to uplift in this area is make sure that your appeal is single-minded. Focus on 1, achieving the objectives of the appeal and the kind of responses you most want to achieve. This could be monthly gift. It could be your year-end gift. Just concentrate on one area or one aspect and that's it. Don't ask for the wrong amount, because this is the third deadly sin. This is a surprisingly common mistake and one that affects the funds you raise enormously, particularly if you get it wrong on donor appeals and if you have a large donor base. I am a perfect example of this. Last week, I got this letter from a national organization that I have supported just in the last 6 months, sent them a really generous gift from me, for me, because it was in honor of someone, and I felt very generous and very sincere about this gift in honor of. So I made a gift of $250 donation, and I should have, it took a long time to get a thank you, which I was kind of surprised, and it kind of hurt my feelings. But now I get an annual appeal. They called me dear friend. They didn't even call me dear Joy. And at the bottom of a very lengthy first page, they asked me for a $25 donation. I thought to myself, they couldn't have segmented. They have no idea who I am. They have no idea of my last gift. This is ridiculous. And I've gotten this blanket annual appeal, and they're asking me for $25. So I think they got it really wrong, and I am not going to gift them again. I was really kind of insulted by their lack of research and segmentation. I just felt like they didn't really care. So your audience should be front of mind at all times when you're developing your fundraising appeals. You should tailor what your donor receives as much as possible to what you know about them. You should ensure that the amount you ask for is appropriate for them. Asking for too much will suppress response, and asking for too little will suppress income and kind of be insulting too. So tip here, for each of your donor appeals, prompt each donor for an amount or amounts that are similar to the donations they have given before. Make sure that you include at least one donation prompt that is higher than the donations they've previously made. So for donor acquisition appeals, consider carefully what level of donation each audience is likely to be able to afford. Make sure that the amounts you prompt for are well supported by the proposition and other elements of your appeal. And always suggest at least one donation amount in your letter, and support this by explaining what difference, what impact this gift would make. So it's, I think it's very important. And if you suspect, if your last gift it was $250 and they did it for a very particular reason, I would really segment these donors and say, your last gift was so generous, this was the impact of that gift, and you know what? If you would consider giving 10% more or 20% more, we could emulate, we could do this again. Okay, now, Rachel says, fourth deadly sin that a fundraiser can make is style over substance. But I could probably do that because I love my themes. She says, we all like creative ideas and good design, and it's exciting to innovate. But it's important to be able to separate the things that excite us from the ones that will drive donations. So witty lines and clever concepts seldom pull harder than a good fundraising proposition. Emotive testimonials and strong, tangible asks and making your fundraising appeal look pretty, cool, or slick don't usually uplift response. In fact, in split tests that Rachel has done, something more plain, functional, and straightforward will often outperform something that is beautifully art-directed or conceptual. That's really interesting. She says, I'm not recommending making your appeals look terrible and sound dry, just to be judicious about your design, layout, format, and messaging, ensuring you focus on what really matters. So resist the temptation to include something that's spectacular but not clearly supporting your fundraising proposition. Okay? Question whether that witty teaser on the outer envelope is really going to get someone to open it. Now, I know for a fact that the picture of the dog and the little bit about the story about the dog got me to open the envelope a lot faster. I could hardly wait to find out what they were talking about. So, be creative. And Rachel says, opt for something that helps to make the case for support stronger or generates emotional engagement instead, like the picture of the dog for me. That was emotional engagement from the minute I saw it. And there was also wording on it that do you know what happened? Do you know the story? I could hardly wait to find out what happened. All right. That might be something quite simple, like a testimonial from a beneficiary or insights from somebody else talking about their work, your fundraising work. So a tip here is to make certain your copy is easy to read, including people whose site might not be as good as yours. And our baby boomers and our traditionalists, they like larger fonts. So use larger fonts, short paragraphs, spacing between the paragraphs, and stand out of your copy stands out against the background. Bold, underline, make it very scannable, because I say very few people really read every word of your letter. They scan it, looking for what parts of it really interest them the most. So ensure that your key messages, such as your call to action and any key information supporting your ask, make sure it comes through clearly. And of course, your response mechanism, you want to make sure that it's easy to read and complete, not a ton of information. They don't have to tell you their life story. You want to reduce the number of steps to respond as much as you can. And make sure everything that you include in your appeal links clearly to your fundraising proposition and makes the case for your ask, the case for your support stronger. All right. Well, the fifth mistake, deadly sin actually, that you could make that I'm sure you're not going to make now, is making false economies. Rachel says a strong appeal requires certain elements, and foregoing these to save money can curtail the amount it will raise. However well-meaning, that's not in the best interest of your charity. Minimizing what it costs to produce your appeals is important, and when you know everything is working hard, this can increase your return on investment. However, the budget for your appeal should be an informed investment, designed to generate as much net income as possible. So invest wisely to generate the best return. And beware making small savings on the cost of your appeals that can drive response and will drive response and income down. Even if your mail house thinks that they're doing you a favor by suggesting a cutback, I mean, if you reduce the number of elements in a direct mail pack, leaving you insufficient space to make the case for support, or if you spend money on a display advertising campaign, you can really lose donations. You may be saving money, but the income you lose is likely to be several times greater. So don't try to cut back too much. The key is to be open-minded about spending more on testing to find out where you should spend your money, where your best returns are. Prove to yourself where your best returns are. So be prepared to use the budget you have for each appeal. Don't try to save money now, because hopefully you left some money in there to test your different pieces of mail, what's working, and just keep working it. And if you feel strongly and have good reason to believe that spending more on a particular part of your campaign is going to make a difference, well, then do it, but test it. Establish whether it's worth investing in again. All right. Deadly sin number 6 would be, Rachel says, poor attention to detail. She says this may seem trivial, but it's crucial, because you want your audience in every single appeal that you send out to be fully engaged with your ask and considering how much they'll give, not distracted by poor punctuation, grammar, and spelling mistakes. It's also about getting small but important details right, such as the recipient's name and salutation. Getting this wrong or calling him dear friend can annoy people and really turn them off. She says there are other little gremlins to look out for too, which she sees often when she's reviewing appeals. This includes the ask amounts being inconsistent across the elements. She says often between letters and different response forms of your direct mail appeal, your inserts, there can be not consistency. Response forms missing asks altogether, or missing a place to indicate the value of the donation or other. So just be careful, because the devil is in the details. And putting a strong fundraising appeal together is all about getting as many of the details right as humanly possible. I know that I use my husband, who is an attorney, to really double proofread my appeal. And it's amazing how his eyeballs see every little mistake. I love it. And now he can do this without reading it out loud, but you always double proof your appeal copy. Get somebody there that really has an eyeball for just seeing everything wrong, the punctuation, the formatting, spelling. They check it, and rely on this person on your team who is really a good proofreader, because you don't want your donor to start noticing your mistakes more than your ask, okay? And last but not least, on 7 deadly mistakes is failing to test and learn. Because if you're not testing your copy, if you're not looking back to figure out what worked and what didn't work, you're really doing yourself a huge disservice. So just, Rachel says, don't take her word for it. Don't take anybody else's word for it. Look at your own testing, your own fundraising results. You know, if you do that, you are going to see what works with your donors and what doesn't. And then you're going to have greater confidence in every appeal you developed and every decision you make, because you're going to look back and say, well, this worked last year and they seem to really respond to it, and let's go with it. One of the suggestions they have here, if you do review your work, don't change more than one element or factor between different test segments if you're going to tweak your letter and send it to a couple of different audiences. But do test it, and there are some really good webinars available and articles about how to test your copy content. All right. Okay, well, this hopefully has given you some good ideas on what to avoid in your annual appeals. I'm Joy Olson of Blockbuster Fundraising. You can find more about us on blockbusterfundraising.com, joyolsongroup.com, and we've got hundreds of fundraising video tips on our Blockbuster YouTube channel. So, hopefully we will inspire you and give you possibly an idea you hadn't thought of, or an idea that you can avoid that looks like it was a deadly a deadly mistake or a deadly fundraising sin. In other words, all positive opportunities for your fundraising success. Thanks for having been here. Bye-bye.